Welcome to the Board of Education's June 2024 work session. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Wright. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Watson will not be in attendance this evening due to out-of-town travel. The Strategic Plan Committee will meet on Monday, June 24th at 2 p.m. in this boardroom, and Ms. Christie will be providing us an update on the committee's work in just a little bit. Also, the Naming Facilities Committee will meet on Tuesday, June 25th at 3:30 to consider nominations for the naming of the Austin East Magnet High School gym floor and the Farragut High School stadium. I want to thank all of you for being in attendance this evening. We do ask that you be respectful and courteous at all times, and if you need to speak to your neighbor, take a phone call, anything like that, if you'll step out of the room to do so. Are there any requested changes to the agenda? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Dr. Reiswick, Superintendent's report.
All right. Thank you, sir. Board members, thank you for the chance to provide some updates. I'd like to begin by congratulating KCS seniors from the class of 2024 who graduated last month. Celeste is in the crowd. I got to hand you your diploma. That was pretty cool. That was fun. I enjoyed doing that. I was like, I know you in the middle of the rain, but we're not going to talk about the beard and rain, right? We just pushed on through. I had the privilege of attending 19 commencement celebrations, and I know many of the board members were able to participate as well. I was encouraged to see many graduates, families, and friends celebrating together, and I'm grateful for all the work that went into these ceremonies. I also want to highlight some statistics from the class of 2024 this year. We had more than 4,300 students graduate from KCS high schools. A lot of handshaking. That was awesome, though. Combined, these students had more than $187 million in scholarships. That's I know several of those, and again, a lot of you were there. A lot of those were records for a lot of the schools that we were at. More than 100 students committed to serve in some form of military service, and that was kind of a neat thing to see. I think all of our classes showed or recognized the folks serving in the military as well as industry certifications. I was glad to see that happen. A lot of people did that as well as scholarship recipients. So they included enlistment and ROTC scholarships, appointments to service academies, and service in the Guard or Reserves. And so, again, I want to say congratulations to the class of 2024. As always, it's inspiring to see countless educators who attend these ceremonies to celebrate their students. That would be one of my favorite things to see. A lot of our schools continue to do things like walk back to their elementary schools to be able to thank those teachers too. I think that's just really a great sign that really is a 13 years, sometimes post that if they're pre-K students of ours as well, commitment, and it's great to see that all of our faculties get to enjoy in that. Over the last 2 weeks, I also heard many students give shout-outs to adults who influenced their lives. It's kind of fun to hear those speeches, what they say with that. And it was common to see students giving fist bumps, giving hugs, high fives to principals at the ceremonies. Those are neat moments, too. We often mention the importance of relationships in K-12 education, and graduation is always a great reminder of the important role our educators play in the lives of our students. So congratulations again to those seniors. I also want to take a moment to recognize the student athletes who won state championships this year or placed in the runners-up category. We actually had quite a few as we started seeing them kind of roll in from spring. I reached out to Dr. Wilson, reached out to Brian Brown too, and I was like, we had quite a few in the fall and in the winter too. And what was kind of neat is it was spread out for schools. We had almost majority of the schools at the high school. So just to go over the ones that won state championships or were runners-up this year. So West High School football, Bearden High School soccer, Farragut boys cross country, Fulton boys basketball, South Doyle boys soccer, Bearden boys soccer, Gibbs softball, Farragut baseball, Bearden dance, Farragut dance, and Halls dance. And I think did Bearden boys? Oh, it does say Bearden boys. My fault. I can't read. Okay, yeah, Bearden boys on there as well. All right. So that was. I mean, that's quite. Almost every school had a state champ or runner-up, which was impressive. And I just want to say this too to Brian Brown. He's not in the room, but I know that was kind of an intentional thing for us to focus on making sure we had everything even at the district level to support the schools to get that done, and he's done a tremendous job. He actually won't say this, but he attended every spring championship, made the trips back and forth to get that done, so really appreciate his support there. Before I wrap up, I want to take a moment to share that we've begun notifying employees of their placement on the new salary schedules that you all approved earlier this year. This has been a tremendous undertaking from the business and talent team, and I appreciate their efforts to get this completed in a short period of time. According to Evergreen, which is the organization that we partnered with, no district our size has ever overhauled their salary schedule in a single year. And as I've stated before, I firmly believe that prioritizing our KCS team members is the right thing to do. With that being said, as you know, more than 9,000 employees at KCS, we recognize from the beginning of this process that there were bound to be some challenges. The business and talent team has been diligent in thinking through that process and addressing questions staff have. Again, we know that was going to happen. I just want to say this before I turn it over to Ms. Himmelgarn to give you guys an update. I appreciate their proactiveness in thinking about designing something like a form. That was not a reaction to salaries going out on Friday. That was something they did on the front side to say, please give us input. We know this is going to be something that happens that there could be questions on. I also appreciate that this is May, or just May when they sent those out. The salaries actually don't change to July and August, so that gives us time to improve on any situations that need to be improved on. And also, I want to say, I was thankful. I had several people stop me when I was out and, thank us for that, and thank you all as the board for investing in people. So in the end, if there are issues, we're going to work those out. But for most people, I think we're in good shape and heading in the right direction. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Himmelgarn, and then I'll be finished to give you guys an update on that process from Friday.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick, Vice Chair Mr. Triplett, and members of the board. We're excited to share, like Dr. Reiswick said, that we have begun the individual notifications of salary for the 24-25 school year. The majority of those went out on Friday, May 31st, with the remainder to hopefully go out this Friday, with one small caveat that we still are waiting on final approval from the state of our consolidated federal funds application. So the remaining notifications of employees in those positions will be contingent on that approval, but hopefully this Friday or next, if not this Friday. Like Dr. Reiswick also shared, we have created a dedicated email address, salary@knoxschools.org, and also a Google form for employees to request clarification on the process or alert us to something that might not have been considered in the transition and placement on the new grade bands. We did anticipate that there would be room to grow in this transition because it's a lot of employees, nearly 9,000, and we're also doing it in a relatively short period of time. So we expected that there would be some feedback that would cause us to provide clarification, and in many cases cause us to provide corrections as well. So we expected and are excited to have received a little over 700 responses to that Google form since we sent it out on Friday. And those responses fall into a variety of categories: clarification on the process, consideration of step placement, verification of degrees. We've given the employees a pathway to upload degree verification if they're moving to a new degree schedule next year as well, if they've attained a degree or are going to at the close of this semester. So excited about all of the responses and the opportunities to engage with those employees. We will ask for a little bit of grace and patience in that process. With the 700, we do intend to respond to everyone, but it will take us a little time to do so. And like Dr. Reiswick said, that's why the notifications came May 31st and then through the next week or two, so that we have time to engage with the employees and provide clarifications and make corrections where necessary prior to those first paychecks going out in either July or August, depending on the employee status and employment agreement length. So we would encourage people to continue using those avenues, that salary@knoxschools.org email address or the Google form. We would also encourage employees to visit our website. There are some resources on the website as well. There's an FAQ. There is a grade band placement form. The employee categories, how to find your spot on the new scale. As the board remembers, the transition was done in two different ways. So we have two pay scales, the teacher scale and then all other employees on the general scale. And for the teacher scale, we've received a lot less questions there because it's a little more self-explanatory if you've held several positions in the district. It's just step as a teacher plus 1 in the transition. The transition on the general scale is using what's called class year parity, which is a little more situation and employee specific. It's either number of years in their current position or current salary on that grade band, whichever's higher, because as we said to the board, our commitment has been that no one will go backwards in salary in this transition. So the general scale transition is a little more individual specific, so that's where we've gotten a lot of the requests for clarifications. So we're excited about showing our employees our appreciation next year by moving all employees to market value. We look forward to continuing to engage with employees and encourage employees to continue using those avenues so that we can provide clarification and corrections.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Is now an appropriate time to discuss that whole salary situation, or is there a better time in the agenda to do that?
I don't know that we have a spot in the agenda other than this, so I think this is as good as any.
Okay,
unless somebody
thank
else
you.
has an objection.
Thank you. So looking at the tutorial video that our employees have looked at, I think it's not at all clear that they are supposed to be looking at either number of years or their current salary. I'm also not convinced that that is an accurate way to look at market value. If I were on the very front end of this and not at all where we are now, I would assume that finding someone's market value would be looking at their year's experience, their current step, and finding the market value for that spot, and then filling that in. And that seems to be what the tutorial video also shows. It very clearly shows our employees to go and find their step and then go up 1. But that's not at all what we're being told right now. Repeatedly throughout the meetings, and I've gone back and watched them this week, we were told again and again no one would go backwards. The words in salary were not part of that. It was no one will go backwards. So our employees don't understand why they've gone backwards. I don't understand why they've gone backwards. I understand the rationale for why they've gone backwards. I don't understand why that wasn't told on the front end. In some meetings, I recall Mr. Bolton was going through and did give a disclaimer that there are some people who were currently above market value. I would assume that that would be a small number based on the way it was presented to us. But a small number of people is not what I've heard from over the weekend. I've heard from an incredible number of people who are incredibly unhappy, who have already applied for other jobs, and whose situations I can't even figure out how they would make sense to anybody. People who have been given credit to come to Knox County. Maybe they had 9 years in another industry. They were given credit for that 9 years as an incentive to come to Knox County, and now those years have been taken away, and they don't understand why. I don't either. If you were incentivized to come here and given your year's experience, I would think that would stay. I've talked to a person who earned a master's degree, who was given credit for that master's degree, who has been earning additional money for that master's degree, and has now been told, yeah, we're not going to count that master's degree anymore. That seems incredibly wrong to me. I've talked to people who have told me that they have an incredible number of years that they've taught in their or worked in their position. Some of them well over 25 that they've been in their position, and that other people in the same position are at a different step than they are, and they don't understand that. I've heard from a lot of people at the very bottom of our salary scale who have been knocked from 11, expecting to move to 12, and they're now down at 3 or 4. and they don't understand how that can be. I've also heard from a lot of people who left the classroom, moved to a position downtown, and so they are not necessarily a supervisory position, but they are somewhere in that chain, and they are at a higher position than they were before. They are now working more days, and their hourly is less than if they had stayed where they were. So they have more days, more responsibility, a higher title, and their hourly rate is now less than had they stayed in the classroom. I'm hearing that from some school-level administrators. I'm hearing that from some folks in central office. I'm hearing that from multiple people across the scale. I've also heard from some people who have relatives who work in their same position, and so they've discussed it at length. They have a lot of years in the position. They have a relative who was hired recently, and that relative is now at a higher step than they are, and they don't understand why. They assume it's a mistake. They are really hoping it's a mistake. I heard from one person who was so distressed to learn that her raise is going to be $30 that she didn't even want to tell her family. When I looked up at the screen, I saw mine. Mine was very clear to me. My raise, if I were in the classroom, would have been about $10,000. I could be real happy with that. When we talk about having historical raises, that's a historical raise. But to our employees who are getting a raise of $30, they don't feel that. They feel something very, very different right now. And I am hoping that we can find a way not just to slightly correct that, but to move them to where they expect it to be. The steps that they earned, so they should still be there. And that's their expectation based on everything we've given them to this point. Thank you.
Ms. Himmelgarn, anything?
Sure. Vice Chair, Mr. Triplett, Ms. Owen, members of the board, thank you for that. And we encourage, I'm hopeful that some of those people have submitted to the Google form, because if there likely are errors to correct. I will say that. We've discovered some today in the responses, which we expected, and that's why we got the notifications out, and we're hopeful that together, us with the employees, that we'll discover all of those prior to them receiving their first paychecks. So thank you, and thank you to the employees that have continued to reach out. We did engage in the study with Evergreen, who determined market value for us, who set the market value for us. And like you said, there are employees that were already closer to market value than others. So the increase for employees in the district is not the same. It's not as we've traditionally done increases, like a flat 4% across the board, for example. It will look different for different categories of employees based on how close they were to market value. But we encourage employees to continue to let us know their concerns, and some will result in corrections, and some will result in clarification on how the transition worked. And that's what some employees have asked for, is just clarification on how the transition has worked. But yes, we want all of those employees to reach out so we can make sure that we're doing this right. That's our intent, is to pay all employees at market value.
Ms. Himmelgarn, one other question. No one is going backwards in pay. That is correct.
That is correct.
And then I know that 700 responses is a lot. It takes time to go through. Obviously, when you mess with people's pay in any way, it's concerning. People get anxious if it doesn't come out the way they expected. Do you have a timeline? If I'm an employee, I've reached out, I feel like it's off. Do you have a timeline where you say, okay, in 3 weeks, 3 months, a month, like a timeline where they can say, okay, by this time I should at least have an answer from you all as to what my issue is and if it's resolved?
Sure. So some employees, even today, some employees do have an answer. As far as responding to all 700. Our goal is in the next couple of weeks. Mr. Bolton has convened a team already to start working through those and respond to the ones that are quick responses as quickly as we can, and then put priority on the employees that are paid in July next, so that we can make sure that those issues are addressed before those paychecks are issued in July, and then of course we have some paid in August. So I don't have an exact time frame, but they've already started responding, and the goal is over the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Thank you. I know that folks get nervous and anxious about that, and just know that this team is working very hard to answer all of those and get a response out. So, any other discussion? Dr. Adams is not here, so we will do a custodial update. Or are you prepared for the custodial update as well? She's got it covered. All right.
Vice Chair, Mr. Triplett, members of the board, I am filling in for Dr. Adams today. We currently have 70 custodial openings with 51 of our facilities fully staffed.
Thank you. And then our strategic plan committee update, Ms. Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Triplett. The Strategic Plan Committee met on May 10th to further discuss our stakeholder engagement processes following board approval of our contract with Milan Chicago. We discussed a methodology of feedback that will be used, including surveys, in-person sessions, focus groups, and interviews, as well as what documents and resources to frame engagement around, such as the district's 4 priorities and annual plans. The committee will reconvene, as you stated, on June 24th at 2 p.m. to meet with representatives from Milan Chicago to further finalize the community engagement pieces. I also believe we will have more information regarding our RFP for strategic planning by that point as well, so I will keep the board informed as we receive that information. And we may even have another contract coming in July.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Butler?
I do not have a discussion point on that. I wanted to go back, if I could, for clarification.
Sure.
So the naming committee, what is the date and time for that again, please?
Sure. It is June 25th at 3:30.
And will there be any opportunity for public comments or engagement?
The last meeting, we had some folks come and discuss why they wanted to name the facility after someone. So if somebody wants to come and speak to that, they can.
And that's at 3:30.
It's at 3:30. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We will move on to the regular session agenda. So we will go to C. Any discussion on C, 1 or 2? 3 or 4? 5 or 6? 7 or 8? 9 or 10? 11 or 12? 13 or 14? 15 or 16? 17 or 18? 7A, Ms. Horn, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Triplett. So obviously, over the last several months, we've had several questions regarding books that are in school libraries and classrooms. And in addition to the concerns from the moms group that we've heard from, I've heard from several people in my district with serious concerns about some of the books. And as I've stated, as other members of the board have stated, I don't think that books that have sexually explicit images should be in our schools, and particularly since these books are paid for with taxpayer dollars. Furthermore, the state legislature has amended TCA 49-6-3803 to more clearly define books that are not age appropriate for students as those books depicting sexual images. So this amendment goes into effect on July 1st. Typically, our board reviews new laws that go into effect in July during our policy review meetings, but since we've talked about this topic multiple times over the past couple of months, I thought it was probably better just to address it sooner rather than later. And again, that amendment goes into effect July 1st. In April, the superintendent's team outlined a review process for books that are challenged at the school level, and that certainly is needed, particularly with regard to content that may not be graphic, but may be in written form. And that review process is also a part of that amendment to the law. So specifically, the books that, or this policy specifically calls out or brings attention to books that include visual imagery that hopefully would be easier to identify than perhaps if you have to read a whole book and have it reviewed. So this really is not in response to this law being brought. This has been a conversation, or this amendment to the law. We've been talking about this for a while. But on July 1st, and Mr. Dupler can speak to it further, but on July 1st, when we get to July 1st, these books will not be, they can't be in our schools. So we're going to have to deal with this sooner rather than later, in my opinion. And basically, our current policy says that books with sexually explicit content should not be in our schools, but obviously we've had a lot of question about that. So I think that this will help bring some clarity so that people can more clearly understand what is and what is not appropriate for books to be in schools. I think that this also lines up with the Tennessee state standards that actually call for abstinence. So I don't think that we should have content that is out of line with Tennessee state standards. And I think that I would hope that all board members would want to protect students from books that are inappropriate and not age appropriate for students. So that's my reason for bringing this now. And so.
Thank you, Ms. Horn.
Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing that. Mr. Butler?
I would yield if our law director was going to make any comments about it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Reverend Butler. I mean, what I would say is that Ms. Horn and I have been talking about this since the discussion has come up through the board meetings, and Ms. Horn was looking for some language that would make it more clear for this specific type of graphic sexual acts, and so I think we both felt like that the suggested language on the board agenda this month is something that librarians and administrators could look to say, okay, well, this is very clear. Since that time, or since Ms. Horn was looking at this language, the Tennessee legislature did amend 49.6, 3803, and in my review of that, certainly I think the legislature is trying to go further than what Ms. Horn is suggesting here. In fact, what the legislature has done is they've referenced a lot of definitions from the criminal obscenity statute, but haven't referenced obscenity itself. So where is this going to go ultimately? That's hard to say because there's going to be some gray area here, but certainly what Ms. Horn is talking about here with this suggested language, there's no question that this would be covered under the new amendments to the statute.
Thank you, Mr. Dupler. Mr. Butler.
So I heard the Tennessee state standards and the Tennessee state law, and the way that we're looking at it with what Ms. Horn has given us, it meets both of those. is what you say, what I'm hearing you saying, or not?
I mean, what Ms. Horn was trying to do, I believe, is to make it clear that, you know, a picture, a depiction, an image of a sex act should not be in the school library. And so she's tried to make that clear here. Certainly, that's consistent with existing state law. Existing state law, when it comes to sexual education, is in favor of abstinence. So it's certainly not in favor of depicting sex acts. But again, if you look at the amendment to the state law that would take effect July 1st, certainly it appears that law is going even further.
So do we need to go further?
At policy review, I mean, certainly. I mean, you know, so I think your point, Reverend Butler, is could this board be looking at this again very soon, you know, in July or at policy review? Absolutely.
And that was my thought, is that, and let me just be clear, I don't want any of our kids to be subjected to anything that's going to cause them any harm whatsoever, unnecessarily or not, or on purpose or not. So I support us looking at this. Number one, to meet our desire for our kids not to be harmed. Number two is to meet state standards, state law and state standards. So that's why I was wondering, why not let us make sure we get it right during policy review, because the other state laws that we have to look at, we have to look at policy review as well. And then we also have the time to really get the language right so that we can not have to revisit it and constantly coming back and hitting it. I think we would do it at policy review and really spend that quality time getting it right. Because I'm not sure how all of us feel, but I know how I feel, and I just want to make sure we get it right, and once we get it right, our staff can carry it out.
Ms. Pike?
Thank you. Yeah, I was essentially going to say very similar to Reverend Butler. It sounds like that, so am I correct that this law has not taken effect? That's July 1st? That we will have to come back to this, that this will not suffice. Is that correct?
What Ms. Horn has suggested does not include all of the language in the new law.
So if it doesn't include that, if we had just this, would we still have to come back and change it?
Possibly. I mean, the board and the school system is going to have to follow the state law, whether you change the policy or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, we typically come back and bring them back. So I would wonder what, what would be the rush to do this now, similar to what Reverend Butler was saying, instead of bringing it to policy review and talking about it then. Because I certainly, agree that I don't want any harm to be done to any of our students or kids in the county, et cetera. And I'm curious if we are working with our library review system, library review team in looking at this policy, will they be present at policy review to be a part of this conversation? Does anyone?
Typically, when we have policies regarding a particular topic, those that are in central office that are involved in that are at policy review. So I would assume.
Because I would love to hear from some of them as to why these books are in our schools and why they're chosen and all of that. I'm not a librarian or did not go to school for education, so I'm not going to claim to have that information. So is this something that we would just push to policy review? Is there some sort of timely manner where we need this to be done this week?
If you don't mind, Ms. Owen, I'd like, Ms. Horn is the one who brought it. Any particular reason why we brought it now rather than later?
Sure, yeah, I would be happy to address that. For one thing, I mean, we have been talking about this since October, November, so this is not a new conversation. So the reason I think that we need to address it now versus later, and frankly, I would like to see us approve this on first read and forego a second reading, so that at least our librarians know that this is the policy. It highlights a change to our policy, and then if we need to go further in policy, then certainly we can do that at the June policy review and review that in July. So that's my preference. I think this is an important topic. I think it's important that we be clear on it, and I think it's important that librarians know now, rather than pushing it down the road another 4, 5, 6 weeks. If they're ordering books, it would be helpful for them to make sure they're reviewing those now based on policy. I think our policy already includes this, but I think that obviously we need some clarification. So the clarification needs to be there, in my opinion, regardless of the law. I was planning to bring this, regardless of the fact that there's an update to the statute. So for those reasons, I would prefer that we go ahead and approve it, and like I said, on first read, so that it's in policy, and then if we need to address it further on, we can do that.
Thank you. Ms. Pike, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wondered if we need to define any of these, or are they already defined in law? Like sex acts, sexual activity. Is there any sort of specificity there? Or is it just anything visual?
So it's images, so it's visual.
Like one of the emails I think we all got today, they brought up kissing, as some people define that as a sexual act. Are we including that?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Does that need to be put in there? Because I would also hate for our librarians to order something thinking that they were in line with this, and then it would turn out to not be in line with this.
Further clarification could be added. We could use language that calls out particular sex acts.
I mean, I don't want to do that, but I think it would be good, some other guidance, so that, our people choosing the books are not getting in trouble.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you. Our policy is that changes should go through policy review first. And I think that's a really important policy, because that gives us an opportunity to discuss and find a lot of things that we might not otherwise notice. For example, the change to I-11 is in a paragraph regarding that the director of schools will establish an administrative procedure, et cetera, et cetera. Any material containing images on and on shall be excluded. If I am a librarian reading this paragraph, that says that material containing images depicting a sex act shall be excluded from this procedure. Not excluded from the library, not excluded from a school, not excluded from being checked out. That says that we are going to go through this process. Particular attention will be paid to addressing the suitability and age appropriateness of the instructional material. But if it depicts a sex act, that's excluded. That's what that says. So before we jump in too quickly to approve something, we need to be really clear about our intent and what it actually says. If I'm an English teacher, which I am, and if I am a librarian, which I'm not, if I'm reading that paragraph, we're talking about the administrative procedure, and we are talking about the attention being paid to those materials, and we're saying that the ones that we consider most concerning are the ones that are excluded. Thank you.
The fact that we even have to have this discussion makes me sick. I'm going to be honest with you. The fact that we are at the point in our world in our society and our schools that these books are in our system, that we have to have a discussion to create a policy to keep them out, just seems absolutely ridiculous that we are here having this discussion, that it's even like an option or a thought that somebody's going to put these in the school. Like, it just absolutely just blows my mind that we're even have to have this discussion. But I think making it very clear now, not waiting. Mr. Dupler can dive into the gray aspects of it and figure out what the law says and bring further changes if he feels that necessary. But I feel like this is a right move. Mr. Butler was next. Mr. Wilson, do you have something to add, if you don't mind, Mr. Butler, before?
Yeah, just quickly. The only thing I was going to add, just from a time sense, our librarians obviously are off contract this summer in terms of actions to be taken and things like that. And then two, normal timeline, Sarah Searle's kind enough to text me during this, for budgeting and those sorts of things is usually October when they receive those budgets. So just in terms of like purchases being made, librarians working over the summer to do that type of thing, that we're kind of in a dead period for that too. So just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Butler?
Thank you. That was somewhat of what I was going to ask, was what was the time frame for the librarians' duties. And so that kind of takes us back. And then also the students won't be back before July. And when is the policy review for July?
Well, it is June 28th. Would we have policy available for this by then? Yeah. For that law? You would already have that ready to go, even though the law doesn't go into effect until July 1st. Okay.
So I think that policy review, and I'm not disagreeing with the reasons that you want to bring it, and also for the reasons that we need to have the clarity. I do agree that talking about a lot of issues we talk about takes us out of our comfort zone. But we live in a world that you watch the news, it takes you out of your comfort zone. So I do think these are things we have to discuss. And having the clarity, I think, is most important, especially for those who have to do the job. So they don't have to guess whether, or second guess, or third guess themselves. So, and I think that the policy review would give us the time to make the sufficient effort to really come up with something. And at that time, if we need to pass it on first read, we can. But I do think we need to really spend time getting it right so that there's not any type of questions that we have to come back and examine. Because, Mr. Triplett, I don't want to have this discussion again, and we've been having it for a while. So I think it's time for us to put it to bed, but let's put it to bed the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Ms. Owen?
Thank you. I would guess that TSBA would give us some kind of model policy sometime in July, probably. I think we would be wise to look at that, at least for consideration. But I also want to note that in I-212, we have the same language issue. My mouse just quit moving. Oh, there it goes. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, and then I'll just say the rest. If upon reconsideration, so this is the reconsideration section, if upon reconsideration the material is determined to be inappropriate for the age and maturity level of the students, et cetera, the school shall remove the material from student access in the collection or grade level for which it has been deemed inappropriate. Any material containing images depicting a sex act or sexual activity shall be excluded. So shall be excluded from being removed. I think if we want this to say what we're discussing, and if we want it to be consistent with the law, then we need to make sure that that is in a paragraph where it says what we intend it to say. Thank you.
Mr. Dupler?
I was just going to say, since Ms. Owen has this concern, I mean, the simple fix would be to add excluded from the school's collection on the end of the sentence, and then that would remove any type of ambiguity. As far as TSBA is concerned, I don't know when they're going to come out with a model policy, and you know, that would likely need to be, you know, worked out with them. So,
okay. Ms. Horn?
Yes, thank you. I was going to actually make the same suggestion on 211 that I think the purpose was to clarify what comes prior to that, where it says sexually explicit. You could even remove the parenthesis and then and add from classroom libraries or media centers or whatever you just said. To make it clear, and I first of all, Ms. Owen, I appreciate you raising the concern, because I do want to make sure that it's clear and it's correct. In 212, I think the added sentence could be moved probably up to number 1, where it says whether the materials are appropriate for the age and maturity levels of the students who may have access. That new sentence could actually just be added to number 1, which would make it clearer. So I can make that, so I would say we could make that change, but that would be much more clear. So I appreciate you bringing that clarity to that.
Any more discussion? All right, item 8A or B, C or D, E or F, 9A or B, C or D, regular agenda items 10A or B.
A,
Sorry, go ahead.
10A, is that what
Yes,
we're on?
yes, ma'am. Ms. Pike.
Yeah, I have a question on 10A. Let me pull that up. So sorry, I had already closed it. Basically that 430 million, I think, that was on the detail for special education. I've had several inquiries about this over the past few months, and I know we've kind of gone back and forth. Was it million or is it thousand? Thousand, sorry. A lot of numbers today. So it says under program designation, it's the second one. It's special education support, services other, 430,000, and it's special education training. Do we have any more information on exactly what that is, if that is an RFP process, what services those are, and all from there?
Ms. Hemmelgarn, thank you.
Vice Chair, Mr. Triplett, Ms. Bike, I'll take the first part of that, and then Dr. Brown has more information. So you are correct that for the 430,000, it's in special education support, services other, and special education training, which is the same thing that we told the board back in April, the special education training. Dr. Brown has informed us that that is an error. That should be special education outside services instead of training for the $430,000. So that's a slight change to this fund balance designation, but I'll let Dr. Brown answer your second question about the RFP.
Dr. Brown.
And Ms. Bike, I just responded to your email a little while ago giving you the answer, but that's okay. Everybody deserves the answer too. And I will admit, I think there's been a lot of confusion in this process. And obviously we've batted around some ideas and some explanations, and I think we've hit all over it. But I talked to Dr. Lloyd today to get clarification, because even I have probably misinformed some people. I understood it to be some trainings that we had, but actually that training money is coming out of our IDEA budget, which this is not a part of. So this money actually is money that is a budgetary requirement. And so when an IEP team meets, there are times that the team will decide that a student needs a certain level of services. So labeling it as other services is correct. So for example, a child comes in and you're doing an evaluation and the parents don't agree with the results, they can request an independent educational evaluation. And so at that point in time, that we would have to pay an outside vendor to do that evaluation. That's what this money is for. Additionally, you may, at an IEP meeting, determine that a student needs some other level of service, which is not so common that we would provide it internally. Like, for example, we employ our own occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists. All of those things would be services we could provide. But say, for example, it was determined that a student needed music services or music therapy. That's not as common, so we don't do that. So the whole purpose of this line item is to ensure that we can provide the continuum of services through special education. So it could be music therapy, it could be that independent evaluation, it could be a residential placement. We would, if the team decided that those were the appropriate services for that child's education, then we have to pay for that. So if we don't have this line item in the budget, then we would be predetermining that we could not provide services for a child, which we cannot do. And again, this is not something that should be a fund balance transfer. And I will just say in the transition of me into this position, I don't know why that was neglected from the budget, but moving forward, this really is a budget line item that we are required to have each and every year. For that reason, we have to be able to show that we can provide services outside of those that we can provide internally. So that's why that's the reason for this. And moving forward, it should not be a fund balance transfer.
Okay, so next year it'll be in our general budget.
Yes, it should be. And I think in previous years it probably was. The timing this year with the transition of Mr. Myers leaving and me stepping into this position, somehow that fell through the cracks. So I'll take ownership because it's my budget now, but moving forward, this will not be it would not be a fund balance request. This should be a regular budget line item.
Do you know how the total was come up with, the 430,000?
I don't. I can ask that. That's the request came directly from Dr. Loy, so I would assume that it comes from previous years and looking at the potential for what is the cost of things like residential placement. Have we historically had to pay for? Again, it's an estimate, and if this money is not spent, then it would roll back into fund balance, obviously. But that's it. We have to have an amount available so that we can provide those services if need be.
I would love to know at a future date, how that total was come to, and then also, and I understand that there are services and all of those things that we don't employ those people on a regular basis. But are there any sort of guidelines, guardrails, or anything where it's yes this, but no, definitely not that? I'd love to know those things at some point too.
Okay, yeah, I would say that. Again, the whole purpose of this is just to provide the funding for whatever decision that the IEP team agrees upon. So, at that point, if the team agrees that services are needed, then this is how we would pay for it.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sure there are limitations. We can't, provide somebody with a new car. That wouldn't be necessary. Sure. But any necessary services.
I'd hope an IEP team wouldn't recommend
that. Obviously that was a
okay.
extreme example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you. Could we get an updated document maybe attached to the agenda so we can make sure that that's accurate? Thank you.
All right, item 10B. Any other discussion? All right, there is no public forum, so we will move to board forum. And Celeste, your last work session, right? And we've been thrilled to have you. Anything? Mr. Butler?
I just want to thank our superintendent for attending all of the graduations, and I want to thank all of the principals and staff for doing such a wonderful job, and then congratulate all of our students and wish them well, and pray for wise thinking along the way.
Thank you. Ms. Owen? Ms. Pike?
Thank you. Definitely happy graduation to all of our graduates and Celeste, and thank you for attending all of them. I got to attend a few of them, and it's very exciting to shake all of their hands and see all the different personalities that we're putting out into the world. It's very exciting. But also we're in June already, which is kind of crazy, but that comes with a couple different celebrations this month besides my daughter's birthday. Juneteenth is something that we're celebrating this month is a holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. The name Juneteenth references the date of the holiday combining the words June and 19th. On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But the slaves were not actually freed until freedom finally came June 19th, 1865. So a few years, and I hope that everyone celebrates this day, no matter how it touches you. And then Also, it's Pride Month, so happy Pride Month. The concept of Pride began with the Stonewall riots, a series of riots for gay liberation that took place over several days beginning on June 28th, 1969. Happy Pride.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you. I would join in thanking the superintendent for attending all those graduations, and they were extremely well done, and it's always a fun thing. That's my most favorite thing we get to do as board members. And then also congratulations to all the teams that Dr. Reiswick read in the beginning. That's a lot of representation at the state championship. We just kept getting notification after notification of all the wins, and I'm sure that there were a lot of people that were not real happy with Knox County because they just kept hearing Knox County. So I was very proud of that, and congratulations to the Farragut baseball team.
Mr. Wright?
Also wanted to add to that what you said earlier with the Gibbs High School girls softball team. That was their 11th state championship. But I want to also commend the runner-up, which was Carter High School. So it was a District 8 battle in the Class 3A girls softball. Also on a lot of your teams too, there were some track state champions too. Probably too many to list, but lots and lots of those to add to that list.
Ms. Christie?
What a great problem for the 8th District to have, right? Playing each other in the championship game. And yeah, just to piggyback, thank you, Dr. Reiswick, for graduations well done. Thank you for holding umbrellas. I'm sure your arm got really tired at least one of those nights. And also thanks to our regional teams. I know they do a whole lot of behind-the-scene work to make those graduations happen at football fields. And you don't see them on the stage, but they're there.
And Carly and her team.
Yes, and just thanks to everyone who worked so hard to make that happen. And again, you kind of took the wind out of ourselves, but congratulations to the Southwest soccer team. We are still celebrating in South Knoxville, even today. And also, I would just like to recognize and thank Emerald Youth Foundation, because a lot of times these things can't happen without our partnerships. And they did literally help us bring the trophy back to South Knoxville as they provided transportation for us. So I do appreciate our partnership with them and the work they do to help our students and schools as well.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. And with that, meeting is adjourned.